Okay, here on Into the Abyss, I actually brought this up to Kevin and Chuck before about recurring horror themes and tropes. Nothing wrong, it's nothing wrong with themes that are constantly reoccurring in horror movies. I think it all depends on how they actually show it to us, the audience. And before I let the two experts here jump in, I'm going to give my amateur opinion about it. Because I have seen some reoccurring themes, especially in horror movies. If I'm looking at it, I think we'll start. No order of importance for me. I think one is sins of the father.
Okay.
Other words, what is going on in the horror movie at that time is the result of something that happened in the past, and a big one has to deal with something that the protagonist's families, parents, grandparents, could have been great grandparents have done. And the best example I think has to be Nightmare on Elm Street. But there have been others as well. Stuff going back to when we used to do VHS rentals. There was this 1980s horror movie called Supernatural. It's about Confederate ghosts trying to kill the descendants of the Union regiment that killed them. There's no blood relation, but they had the same numerical designation. Another theme I see, of course, with horror movies is sex equals death. And that's been around for a while, and it's kind of hilarious because actually no.
Earlier.
In some of the early movies, if you think about it, when you had the couple, now of course when we're thinking of horror tropes, you're thinking that they actually have a set figure of the dumb jock, the virgin girl, the fool, the whore, if you will. I was thinking about the original Friday the 13th where the loose girl actually was in a committed relationship with a very, very young Kevin Bacon. It didn't really matter about her status, but I think they kind of ran from there. Another one I think of a recurring horror theme has to be, fear of the unknown. To be honest, that scares me more than anything else. Where is this monster coming from? What is its purpose? So, I might think of a few more, but I think I need to let the experts in.
Well, before the experts jump in, we watched one of those movies, The Fog. The Fog was the sins of the father.
Absolutely.
Sins of the past.
The characters who were suffering were not... the remake made them direct relations to the conspirators.
Yeah.
But the original was just, no, you're living here in this town that
in
killed
the
us.
wrong place in the wrong time. So, so tropes are. So let me say this. I spent many years before I sold a single story, and early on in my career, doing primarily book reviews. That was kind of how I was trying to get in print and things like that. And I'm gonna be very careful saying this. This is assuming anybody actually watches these videos, but
and assuming you're ever careful.
So I always knew when the book might not be very good when I would get the ARC or the publicity for it would say this novel breaks all the rules or is trend setting a modern, and I'd be like, so you mean it's crap. So there's something I'm gonna get we talk about this with my AP students. It's called intertextuality, and the idea that there's really only one story. And that everything is self-referential. And the funny thing about that is there's a level of comfort there for readers and viewers, not that they know how the story is going to end. Because yes, a movie or a story can be so predictable that you then end up asking yourself, why am I watching this? But it's kind of the same thing with my movie reviews. I will always take a trope that is well-worn, it's a classic trope, if it has been executed well. And also, too, I think readers and viewers, for a story to have some kind of resonance, it has to be something we can connect with. So therefore, the tropes don't just become... I always get a little annoyed. The term for this is edgelord. I always get the internet term anyway. I always get a little annoyed when I see the latest internet edgelord who's like, I don't bow to horror tropes. I write truly original stories. But see, you can definitely do original spins. We've already said this book many times. I'm going to say it again. by Paul Tremblay. Head Full of Ghosts. That is a wonderful modern take on the exorcism story. And also musing on the intersection between reality TV and reality. But it's still a great story, and you're still, at the end of that book, I still don't know if it was a real ghost or not. I still don't know if it was really a possession or not. So that was, but see, in that case, Paul Tremblay was respectful to the tradition. He did something new, but he was, so I think the tropes are essential. If you have not read it, you should go read this right now. Dance Macabre by Stephen King. He talks about what he likes to call the horror tarot, the horror tarot cards, the beast from within, the evil from without, the mad scientist trope. These are things that are repeated over and over and over again. And there's a reason why they're powerful. When he talked about the beast from within, my favorite was he highlighted I'm married, or was it I'm in love with a teenage werewolf with Michael Landon. Mm-hmm. And he said it's the most powerful. You're 16, 17, your body's changing, you're turning into a monster, you can't control your hormones. So the idea...
We can understand that with our students.
Yeah, as teachers. And the fact that this young, suave guy who's taking out your daughter, when the full moon is up, does he turn into a monster? He said that's a powerful thing that resonates. So, there are different ways that you can do the monster from within, but the monster from within is an important trope. Same thing with the thing from outside, the outside evil that attacks us. I said this already before, we've talked about this. That's why during the 50s, we're just inundated with alien invasion movies, because the commies are coming.
Do you think that movie, like a silver bullet, it actually means a condom? That's how you protect yourself from the monster?
What?
I think that works. Chuck! What do you think, Chuck? You were talking about the teenage boy becoming a monster in the full moon.
Okay, we have to contextualize that, though. Silver Bullet, who is the werewolf? Spoiler alert for a 30-year-old movie.
What?
Do you know who the werewolf is? You've never seen it?
No, I had never seen it. It's an old movie.
The priest is the werewolf.
Okay, thanks for
so that becomes obviously anyone who is in a holy profession or a profession of ministry, they have that battle, and you can see throughout the movie he starts out okay.
Oh wait, no, you're talking about Silver Bullet. I thought you were talking about American Werewolf or Teenage Werewolf.
We already did.
No, I know. Yeah, I saw.
But you said Silver Bullet.
I was talking about how it was like a.
Okay, that's what I couldn't understand.
I could have said,
wait, but you said, do you think the Silver Bullet is a kind of like, what? Chuck, please save us, Chuck.
No!
Please save us.
I'm still trying to figure out the whole condom bullet thing. So.
Oh God, this is gonna get me.
That's what I was having a problem with. I was like, is that a brand name or?
No, I think there's the difference with tropes, and I wouldn't say we're experts on this. To be honest, you guys have probably seen more horror movies than I have. So there's the viewer perspective.
Well, I think you can
tropes.
go just horror in general.
Right.
It's a horror story.
But speaking about tropes, you really can't escape tropes, no matter the genre. But even especially in like speculative fiction genres, popular genres, you have to stick within a well-worn path for the most part. It's very hard to form a new path because something is going to be very similar. It's because it works. Books are kind of like dinner in that way. You go to a restaurant, there's only so many ways they prepare your steak, or there's only so many ways they prepare your burger, your vegetables, because you could throw bleach on them, but that's just not going to work. Like there's only so many ways to prepare it and make it, and somebody comes up with something new and it's interesting, it still probably has a lot of similarities to the way it's been prepared before. It's because your palate expects certain things and is satisfied certain things. Tropes are the same way. The reason they became tropes is because someone at some point it was new and novel, and someone at some point said this works as a story, and readers read it and said this works as a story, and it stuck because it works, and that's why the tropes stick around, which means they work. The issue with tropes is not that tropes exist; it's when a story becomes tropey. That's the key there. When the story feels like it's just playing it safe and it's stuck within the tropes and it's been predetermined how the story should be based on how 1,000 other people have written the same story, then that's the issue. But then the other way you can swing is, like you mentioned, the edgelord trying to make I avoid all the tropes. Well, no, you can't. There may be a rare story that somebody comes out with something that's like, this is like nothing I've read before and it works. But even story structure, after thousands of years of people telling stories, we've just realized stories work well in certain patterns, and they just do.
We talked about that with my students with intertextuality, is you really actually couldn't come up with a completely original story because then people wouldn't want to read it because it'd be so disconnected from the human experience.
Yep.
And see, that's where Chuck makes a good point. And again, also too, there's also, in my mind, there are different levels of enjoyment. Like, I either want to be intellectually engaged or I want to be, this is fun. For example, the entire Victor Crowley series, Hatchet, we're not there for intellectual engagement. We're there for, that's just splatter fun is all it really is. But if it's well done, like I'll be the type of person where I say, I don't care if it's tropey. If it's well written, if it's well executed, if I enjoyed reading it, that at the end of the day. Now, here's a different thing, because we were talking about this before we started filming. So there's classic story tropes, but then there's these subgenre tropes that become uber specific, and they're the type of tropes where like only fans of this certain trope, like they love it unreservedly, and the rest of us are like, what's wrong with you? Like, for example, I made an attempt recently to try out some Italian horror. Some giallo, Dario Argento. I tried to watch From Beyond. I tried to watch a couple other things.
I actually just watched a short from Dario Argento last night, and I laughed at a couple parts with the music selection.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Yeah. But I have friends. One of them who someday will have a guest on the show, Wes Soudard. And he's a splatterpunk author. I mean, that's his field. He is an Argento fanatic, and I'm just like, well, I should probably try it out. And there are certain things to an Italian film that just, it's part of the, like, from what I can tell from the very little that I sampled, Italian horror is very dreamy, very surreal. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but just go with it. The gore is not even really gross, because the blood looks like cherry Kool-Aid, you know. It's like, I will tell you this though, I weathered all of that. What I could not take in a little bit of Italian horror that I've watched is that at the most gruesome dismemberment or the goriest scenes, they always seem to play this 70s porn backtrack, which like a chicka bow bow bow, and this person's face is melting off, and you got this guitar going.
Or the one I watched was more like a jazz. It was like playing jazz.
Someone's being disemboweled, and their eyes plucked from their head, and you're like, and I'm just like, this is not working for me at all.
Yeah, I cracked up laughing like they found the body.
But then some people
laughed.
Some people hate Lovecraftian horror because of that. Because Lovecraftian horror is always like, oh, I can't see it, I can't explain it. If you love, so I don't know if we have pimped these people yet, but we're going to pimp them now.
Put on your feather cap.
If you love tropes, but you also, I've always felt that people who love a trope are the best ones to pick on it, because they love it, and they love it in spite of its flaws. You need to go on Twitter, and you need to follow the Midnight Pals. Now, they have a couple books out that I want to order here eventually. So this is like a total off-the-cuff plug. Midnight Pals is a Twitter handle that imagines, like, back in the 1800s and 1700s, they had these gentlemen's societies where they would tell ghostly tales.
Which is also a trope, by the way.
Right, it's also a trope. Let me tell you a tale. Well, and that starts with, in Ghost Story. Mm-hmm. What's the worst thing that ever happened? No, I can tell you the worst thing that ever. So, the Midnight Pals takes that trope, and it's made up of, the Midnight Pals, the core group, is made up of Edgar Allan Poe,
Ah.
H.P. Lovecraft, Clive Barker, Stephen King, and Dean Koontz. And they're all sitting around, I submit for the approval of the Midnight Society, the tale of. And what they just do is they end up having anyone who's anyone. In fact, actually, the new thing for young horror writers is to get named on the Midnight Pals. Like, there's been a couple horror writers who have been named on the Midnight Pals. And what's great about them is they are true horror fans.
Yep.
And I'm really impressed by their knowledge, because today's guest on the Midnight Pals was Robert Aikman. And he goes, tonight I present to you the super awkward, weird, vague supernatural story that has absolutely no closure. Which is like, I love Robert Aikman, but that's every single one of his stories right there. And what they do is they are lovers of horror, but yet then they clearly lampoon all the tropes. My favorite is the fact is that Dean Koontz character is this nerdy little kid who's like always trying to be really scary, but he's not. So they portray him as being like that annoying younger brother that everyone's trying to have to explain things to.
Georgie.
Yeah, Georgie. Like, there's this one scene where Clive Barker's like, it was Ed Lee. Ed Lee is like, hey, Dean, pull my finger. And then Dean's like, okay. Dean's like, no. Then Stephen King's like, no, don't. So it's Midnight Pals. That's my impromptu recommendation for Tropes.
And if I can just add on here, because I just realized with a lot of these tropes, a lot of it comes back to something similar. And because there was a few more I was going to add, one being playing God, where something,
Mad
and
Doctor.
this is a big sci-fi horror one too, where men essentially tried to get involved in something they should not have got involved in. Now in the 1990s, they finally came up with the complete DNA map, and then President Bill Clinton said, we now know the language only known to God. And I was thinking, oh my God, that's a great horror tagline.
There you go.
But then I just realized a big trope is just the evil that men do.
Yep.
It's scarier. I think maybe why we like horror is that we can say this is something else. But then we realize man is just much worse.
Yep.
We were talking earlier, and I finally realized the name of the movie was Death Ship. Where
I've seen that popping
it was
up on my queue.
a haunted ship that was a German Kriegsmarine from World War II, was a floating concentration camp, and of course ghosts are killing off these ship survivors. But then you also realize what people can do is much worse than anything else. Right now I'm reading The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Okay. And that is just, I've always told my kids, Stalin's the only guy who can take the title worse than Hitler, and it is how terrible it was.
Then, I also thought that, and then I read what the Japanese were doing to the Chinese.
Oh, yes.
And their experiments.
Yes.
And I was like, that's rough.
I think that's why for horror troops, they take a lot from what mankind does.
Yeah, and the tropes also, like I said, we've talked about this before, the tropes follow cultural developments too. Like, I remember I got into a discussion. I teach at a Catholic school, which ironically,
yeah, so do I. You bring that up a lot. Like, it's a big thing.
Well, I was always a little worried about being a horror writer that they would be, but they've actually been pretty okay with it. I can't remember who I got into a conversation with about it, but it's interesting how when you're talking about the evil that men do, there are still exorcism movies out there. Actually, there's been a resurgence of exorcism movies, so you could really analyze that and what that says about our social consciousness. But like, I remember the scariest movie ever, when you were younger, was something. I know for me, I guess I should rephrase this because of my upbringings. It was anything that was demonic, like Hellraiser, the Exorcist movies, demon possession. But now the kids that I teach, they're all like, "Oh, Saw is awful." Or Hostel is awful, and you wonder if, like you said, if we've seen kind of a cultural shift away from being concerned about our souls. We're mostly concerned about the destruction of the body. Although there are still plenty of exorcism and demonic entity movies out there. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're kind of drifting. Should we?
Yeah. Well, we come back. We can fire off a few. We wanted to go with tropes, so I'll mention. There's two sides to this one. heavily with involving Catholic movies and also Protestant
Why
movies.
you
on
keep
one side.
thumbing me?
No, I'm not thumbing you. I'm counting. Sorry, I'm counting. I'll put it this way.
A source of abiding tension
Yeah.
is this is like the Catholic Protestant sandwich here, where like here's the Catholic filling in the Protestant sandwich. But anyway,
And we all know the filling's the most delicious part of the sandwich.
anyway.
So you have the priest trope, I'll say.
Oh,
And you, anytime you get into the supernatural stuff with like Christian aspects, they pretty much automatically go Catholic. 99% of the time. Actually, that was something that came up in the story I submitted to an agent, not an agent, editor, and when having it reviewed, and it's like, probably want to make sure that they're specifically Catholic, not Protestant, even though they're Christian. And I
Are you
said,
gonna like
yes.
call me, say, tell me what it's like to be you? What are your people like, Tom?
Yes. Yes, you're.
What are
Tell me
your
about your
people?
backwards culture. No, I'm not. No, but it's just but it is a trope, and it's because if you're going to have a Christian positive character, you're going to bring in somebody who's a Catholic priest, and that's just what we've seen before in books and in movies. So that's what people are comfortable with.
That's just inspired a new book recommendation.
Yeah.
I'm not going to throw it
Yeah.
in here because we're running out of time.
Right. But almost 99% of the time, it's going to be a Catholic priest if you're going to do it.
Yep.
Bring in a Christian aspect. The flip side of this, and this is probably even a more common trope, is the how horrible Christianity is. I actually, if we talk about movies later, I could have one, and then it was thrown in there.
Got another book recommendation for two book recommendations for that. So
and it's one where it's just become a very common punching bag. I mean, it's been an old punching bag. It's been around since at least the Monk, which is hundreds of years old. And
the Monk is like the first horror. Like,
Yeah.
oh my god, terrible things are happening here.
But it's. I was watching the movie. I don't want to give the name of the movie here because we might talk about it later. But it brought in this whole thing. I'm going to burn this cross and hate Christianity. And I watched. And I'm like, there's nothing else in this movie that even fits this. Like this trope was shoehorned in. Mm-hmm. It didn't earn it at all. But that is a very common trope.
Yep.
I would also say other religions get it. Usually more pagan religions. If you have a movie, what's the movie we watched? Came out not too long ago. One where they travel over to
Midsommar.
Midsommar, yeah, Midsommar. So you can
Punch.
get into the punch. You get into the pagan religions as well as a common trope. But let's say anti-Christian is a trope. Another trope: gratuitous sex scenes. And Cabin in the Woods kind of make fun of that one. There, it's just there because it has nothing to do with the movies at all, and it often ties into what you mentioned for the trope, which is the sex gets you dead idea. So yeah, it's probably not in the movies to actually further the plot. We'll just say that.
Well, it becomes expected.
Yeah,
And that's probably when the trope crosses over. And like I said, there's lots of levels of enjoyment.
Yeah.
There's I'm intellectually engaged, or this has ticked off all the boxes for the kind of movie I wanted to watch today.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what are your feelings? Why don't you actually comment down in the comment section?
What are you asking for, Tom? Be careful what you wish for.
I'm just saying, you have your own thoughts. These are our thoughts for tropes, and it could be what you think. It could be what we think.
And just be aware that since there's going to be one of you watching this video, we're talking directly
to you,
so you put the
5
comments
people
down
who
there,
watched this video,
and then go to us.
but actually probably the one person who made it the entire time.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Tropes.
Thank you.